Hello and welcome. During today's webinar, we're going to explore how you can leverage LimaCharlie's integration with alphaMountain to provide domain and IP intelligence feeds for increased cyber protection based on continuously trained AI models. I appreciate everyone taking the time out of the busy day to be here with us. I know there are a lot of things competing for your attention, but we feel this is a valuable conversation and are very glad that you're here. If any questions come up during the talk, you can add them to the chat window of the specific platform you're watching from. We will try and answer any questions as they come in and can address those that we didn't get to at the end. I would also like to thank our panelists for being here with us today. They're both very busy people, and we're very lucky to have them here sharing this valuable knowledge with us. My name is Christopher Luft. I'm one of the co-founders at LimaCharlie, and I'll be moderating the conversation. Thanks again for joining us today, Matt and Will. To kick things off, why don't you each quickly introduce yourself, starting with Will.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for the intro, Chris. My name is Will Andre. I am the lead evangelist here at alphaMountain. We provide domain threat intelligence and help organizations make faster products safer and keep their organizations safe from malicious links and risky IP addresses.
Hey everyone, Matt Bromley, lead solutions engineer over here at LimaCharlie. And on my day-to-day, I get to help folks build the security programs of their dreams using some of the best-in-class tools that we've got available here.
Matt, for anybody who is maybe joining us for the first time, can you give us a high-level explanation of what LimaCharlie is and what kind of value it brings?
Yeah, absolutely. So my little intro was actually a really good segue into this as well. LimaCharlie is a collection of different types of building blocks, things that you would need from a security perspective, almost as if you were kind of putting together any sort of security platform or wanted to increase your security posture. You're going to need different bits and pieces to do that. It's going to range everything from telemetry to detection and response capabilities, which is what we're going to be working with alphaMountain today, to data outputs, to data customization, enrichment, third-party add-ons, so on and so forth. Really, anything you need to kind of build out that security program that you need or that you want, we provide those services for you. We do so very transparently. We've got an awesome way of providing that for folks. We're API first, multi-tenant, detection as code, infrastructure as code. All the ways that security really should be provided for folks is LimaCharlie in a nutshell. From a value perspective, a lot of our customers tend to find a lot of value in capabilities like what we're going to talk about today. We're not just a place that you send data to and then just kind of hope something happens. We give you the ability to act upon it, to detect it, to enrich it, to go further into it, to delve deeper into systems if you need to delve deeper into data, correlation, so on and so forth. So I think one of the things that we're going to focus on today, which is the API integration from the folks over at alphaMountain. And again, Will, great to be here with you, is also going to, add to the fact that we let you bring data in and do some additional enrichment with it that may not necessarily be detection and response related. So Will, I know when you kind of introduced yourself, you talked about alphaMountain helping people not visit, not click, and deal with malicious links and malicious sites and things like that. So we look at this as another way to maybe enrich network telemetry or make better decisions off of the data that you're bringing in, and really happy to be here today and kind of share this wonderful, wonderful integration with all of our viewers.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Matt. Will, do you want to go into what alphaMountain does a little bit deeper?
Sure. Yeah, I'd love to highlight some of the sort of core competencies and use cases. So alphaMountain is a domain and IP threat intelligence data provider. So through our API, you're able to look up the risk of any IP or host on the internet. You're able to get the factors that are determining that risk, and also verdicts that come in near real time. And so when we look at being able to we look at sort of two use cases. One is security products, obviously, who need to know where their traffic is going, both in and out of their network. So enhancing the security capabilities of other security vendors, and then also this sort of SOC and investigation use case where we're enriching data that's coming in about risky sites and IPs. And so we kind of look at three things. We kind of like the three Fs. We have sort of freshness of data. We're really fast at being able to render a verdict. Fidelity, right? How granular and how confident are we in those scores, and how much information we're able to give to the end user, and then factors, right? Being able to show you how we determine the risk of a domain. Super important and super helpful in terms of providing that actionable intelligence that you can integrate into your workflows. So I'm super excited to be here and join you guys to show how we hook up with LimaCharlie.
Very cool. Before we jump into the demo with Matt, do you want to give us a look at alphaMountain?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is Threat Yeti, and this is a really unique product in the sense that this is built on top of our API, and Matt will dive a little bit deeper into sort of how the API itself is usable inside of LimaCharlie. But we built this, for two purposes. One, to demonstrate the value of the API and how we can render threat verdicts in near real time, but also to sort of like level up, right? SOCs and maybe junior analysts who don't necessarily know what they're looking for or know how to render a verdict on a site. So this is our basically Google for risky sites, and you can see here there's a number of ones that have just come in, and we can click into any of these, and I can walk you through sort of what we're seeing and why we're rendering this sort of high risk. So here's this potentially risky domain. It's a 9.1 on our scale. And we show you right away that this is probably something that you don't want to visit, or you may want to implement some tooling or rule set to block traffic going into or out of this site. You can see here the factors, right? So like I mentioned earlier, we show you why we landed on a risk rating, and then also the categories, right? So this is obviously a malicious and/or pornography site, so I don't think we're going to be visiting that on this demo, and hopefully never. Yeah, so this is how we render a verdict on a site. You click into that, and you can see all of the different factors that go into determining that. So there's obviously a lot of other risky domains on that host. It's got a high risk score, and it shares the IP with risky hosts. It's an unpopular site, so typically unpopular sites are riskier, right? Mm-hmm. Things that are seen a lot or tend to be lower risk. And then you've got different mail servers and name servers in different countries. Low DGA probability is not really helping this that much, and then the age of the domain is not really helping that in this case either. But another popular sort of viewpoint into a domain here is the related host. So you can see this is probably a shared hosting environment with just a ton of other kind of gnarly stuff on it. And yeah, so imagine use case here where you're running a SOC, you've got a bunch of guys who you're sort of bringing in on day one, and you've got to sort of close out definitively some investigations as far as like where things are going, where they're coming from. Threat Yeti, built on top of the alphaMountain API, obviously is a great way to sit them down and show them what they're able to do and what they're able to see, and to be able to act with confidence in terms of closing out some of those tickets. But yeah, I'm happy to dive into any more of that. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop them into the Q&A.
Yeah, very cool. Nice looking platform. And I guess now Matt's going to show us how the API from alphaMountain, the same one that feeds Threat Yeti, can be leveraged to probably create some detections and do all kinds of wonderful things.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a really useful feature. Now, I will say alphaMountain is a third-party add-on. So for anyone who's currently a LimaCharlie user and wants to get involved with or get their data involved with alphaMountain, you're first going to need to grab an API key, which you can reach out to the folks, and we'll throw some contact information into the chat for everyone. However, you're going to want to enable that or turn it on from within our add-on marketplace. Now, if you're familiar with LimaCharlie, you know what this is. If you're not familiar with LimaCharlie, this is where you can extend the platform out using various third-party integrations, whether they're APIs or services and different things like that. You may notice on our front page, we've got things like VirusTotal, which you would use for data enrichment, similar to alphaMountain. You may use something like Atomic Red Team, Velociraptor, which is a big digital forensic and incident response tool, as well as some other curated rule sets and things that we have available. Being an API lookup, we're going to navigate right over to the API side, and you can see we've got 3 alphaMountain capabilities here, the category, popularity, and threat API lookups. Now, I will note, Will, you're the expert here on all this, but I'll just note when we were setting this up, these are different kind of true sources of data, if you will, or sources of truth, maybe is the better way to say it, depending on the type of information that you're looking for. Sometimes categorical lookups are just exactly what you need. I want to define whether someone's looking at malicious sites or, time wasting sites or things like that, all the way to I want to know if this site is potentially a threat, if it's a malicious to me and my organization and whatnot. So we don't enable one at all at the same time. You actually have 3 different API lookups, and you would reference those 3 individually if you needed to. Now, if you had an API key that gave you access to 2 or all 3 of them, you could certainly reference both in detection rules. The nice thing about doing this within LimaCharlie is that it gives me the ability to decide what I want to do with that data. And it also gives me the ability to determine what is data enrichment versus what is an alert. So, for example, adding alphaMountain's category to network telemetry is not an inherent malicious thing. It's just telling me what that particular site is. However, if I go the threat side, some of the information returned from that threat would be of importance and may be something that allows me to write a higher fidelity detection. But nonetheless, the add-ons are right there in our marketplace, and they are publicly available as well. Now, when you enable an add-on, what you do in the LimaCharlie side is you actually turn the service on in the backend, which means you're able to reference that extension in your detection and response rules. It's not an automatic enrichment that takes place. We definitely don't want to blow up your data storage or your data quantity by simply adding a bunch of things on top and then saying, good luck sifting through the noise. We actually need to reference this API in order for those calls to be made. This also saves you when you have limited API keys. Now, Will, again, you're going to be the expert on what those look like. But when an API key is assigned, typically there's some sort of numerical limit or some sort of data limit or something provided with that. We don't want to give you a feed that you burn through in 5 minutes or something like that. So you've got to make an API call in order to get that data back. And you're going to do that via a detection and response rule, which I've got teed up right here. I can show you a little bit about what that looks like. So remember, in LimaCharlie, detection and response rules are those 2 parts, detection and response. What am I looking for? What do I want to do? And then what do I want from the data that comes out of that? Looking at our alphaMountain, I went with the category lookup for this particular demo here, Chris. And all I'm doing in this case is everything else looks normal, like we would reference any network telemetry event that comes in. Notice in this case, for the alphaMountain categorical lookup, I am going to need a domain name. So I'm going to be looking at DNS events. And that's exactly what I'm doing here. The event of interest that I want to pivot against is a DNS event. I'm going to be pulling the domain name from that DNS event. My operator is going to be a lookup. And there's my LimaCharlie resource API call out to alphaMountain category. Now, there are a few ways to whittle this down if you need to, because if you're looking at this rule and you've written a detection and response rule before, you're going to realize, Matt, you're looking up every single domain that gets pushed through LimaCharlie. There's a lot of DNS requests. Absolutely. We could filter this thing down a little bit further with some additional and or conditions. We could utilize host-based tagging or organizational level tagging or some other descriptor in order to filter these quantities down. I got a couple of use cases in my mind. Let's say you're in a SOC and you're curious only in external facing devices about the DNS requests that they're making. I may then use a tag that says, hey, this thing is a user laptop, or this is a user workstation, or this is some sort of perimeter edge device. So I'm going to quantify them accordingly. You could go another route, and let's say we're in an incident response, and of 100 systems, there are 10 of interest. I might tag those 10 and then throw all my API lookups against those 10. Because if I know they're compromised, I'm definitely going to want more data enrichment than I will the ones that are just kind of sitting there dormant or sitting there being nice and quiet, if you will. But I put together a really simple, straightforward, every DNS request, bump that domain name up against alphaMountain category. From the response perspective, all I did was report these out. Again, if you've written LimaCharlie detection and response rules before, you might notice I did a little bit of data transforming here. What I did is I want to report this out, which means it's just going to send anything that comes through this detection. It's going to send it out to the detections window. Of course, we can output via that specific stream if we want to a little bit later. And the name that I'm giving it is going to be alphaMountain category on, and then I'm pulling from the event to reference that host name. So what this is going to do is actually give me a alert with the host name in the alert, and I'm going to be able to pivot on those if I need to, and my categorical information is going to be inside of there as well. I'll make a quick note for everyone. We could go a step further. And if I hop back to category, you may notice that the categories from alphaMountain are actually provided and listed right here. If I wanted to go a step further, I could drop a little bit of logic inside of my detection and response rule. And I could say, if this thing is, and I'm just going to pick one that is fairly innocuous. If this is, category ID 24, it's gambling. And then I could go back and modify that alert. And I could say, something to the effect of gambling site found on routing.hostname. You could go through and specify those as much as you need to, or as much as you wanted to add that on. Again, to just give you an easier recognition in that detections window of what you're looking at. Anyways, detection and response rule in place. We can save this. Everything checks out. And you can see at the bottom right corner, we're good to go. And like any good demo, I had one teed up ready for us to look at, and it went and timed out on me. I was performing some pretty intensive searches on the back end to try and find one. Let's see if I can't replicate that really quick. And I'm just going to quickly jump down and pull up my alphaMountain category. And hopefully I'll get a quick example I'll be able to walk through for everyone to see what that data looks like. While that's loading on the back end, I just want to pick on a couple of other detailed points about bringing this rule together. You could, of course, and this is a LimaCharlie feature that we're really proud of, you could, of course, go back in time if you wanted to and replay that event against some of your telemetry that is already within your environment. And assuming you get a hit on that, you'd be able to reference and see what happens. Unfortunately, at the current state, things like APIs and external lookups are not going to work from a replay perspective. Primary reason for that is I don't want to replay against all my historical DNS and then have huge quantities of alphaMountain API calls being made. However, we could, of course, take this out and say, do I have any DNS request information in my history? If I do, I know I'm receiving that telemetry, and I could structure a rule accordingly. And sure enough, we've got a rule up and ready to go. Oh, we did. Of course, I'm not the best at going through this. You'd think I had some experience going through this, Chris, in getting this rule up here. So apologies. This was up and I was ready to go, but then we accidentally clicked on something. So let me try one more time to see if we can get that up. Another quick note that I want to mention, we do provide for every single one of alphaMountain's APIs. We do provide some additional lookups here. Will, you guys probably have some amazing resources lined up for your users as well, but we do have some really easy links from the marketplace if you wanted to get more insight on exactly what those lookups do. But it's a really good resource to be able to have. And I want to give the folks at alphaMountain a huge credit here while I'm getting this query set up correctly. Because little known history here, we actually met the folks at alphaMountain at Black Hat Europe in December of 2022. And that started the conversation of us working through and getting this integration up and running. And now we're in June 2023, and I'm excited that we're here and we've got this up and running as well. And without further ado, let's take a look at what that alert actually looks like in the background. Now, with any LimaCharlie alert, you're going to have typical information like routing details, links to the alert, detection information, so on and so forth. But the key detail that I want is right here. And what we've done from a detection perspective is we reach out, we make that call to alphaMountain, we pull that data back, and it just escaped on us there. But I noticed that we did have a categorical ID of 34. And 34 in this case is an information technology site. We could go and structure that rule accordingly if we wanted to. And that gives us insight into what happens. And you may have captured this as well as we were going through it. And I'll find a better example of that demo instance and share that out with everyone here. But another thing you may have noticed is we also provide a link to the Threat Yeti lookup for that particular domain, which is what Will demoed a little bit earlier for us as well. So with that said, alphaMountain, it's available in our marketplace. It's a really simple DNR rule. And then you've got events populating. You can start to use them to your advantage.
That's
for you.
Yeah, super cool stuff. And if I got it right, the three categories that we integrated so far are category, popularity, and threat. Will, can you kind of talk about what those particular flavors of your API are and how they would be used in like a SOC kind of setting?
Yeah, I can try. So those APIs are obviously sort of like the starting points for building a sort of a robust detection and response framework, as Matt demonstrated. There are other aspects to it that you can bring in, or elements to it that you can bring into your organization, and that really just comes down to sort of the level of fidelity and what you want to use the data for. So again, that's things like factors, and then responses, and we can bring all of that forward to Whois records and passive DNS, things like that as well. So a lot of that is pretty advanced, right, in terms of getting in terms of bringing that into your existing workflows and solutions, but it's all here, ready for consumption, and to help you in the SOC to get really just really confident in your investigations.
Right. Matt, can you think of any scenarios for the different API categories?
Yeah, absolutely. As I mentioned earlier, if I was like SOC monitoring and I wanted to enrich my network data, you could certainly use it from that angle. And again, we could use tagging to filter down on things like operating system or system importance, crown jewel declarations. I might even go as far as to say, hey, if I've got a domain controller performing external lookups, I want to know about that. So depending on where you see the telemetry, you could use that. The other one I referenced earlier was incident response. That's another scenario where, again, I've got a few systems that might be under a magnifying glass. And in that case, I am interested in maybe categorical output, but I'm a little more interested in maybe the threat related details. Because if I've got a beaconing C2 or some other thing that I might want to know about immediately, or I might want to know, is this system reaching out to anything malicious? Right. I'm going to want to use like that threat detection feed instead. And I think that would guide you more towards that particular usage. I'd go the other way, and Will, maybe you'll agree with me. I hope we don't want to fire hose and turn every single category on every single network event that happens, or sorry, every single lookup on every single network event that happens. We definitely want to try and space those out a little bit and have reasons for them. However, that being said, the other nice thing that we can do inside LimaCharlie is we can also kind of pivot on top of detections as well. So I can have one detection lead to another. So another thing that you could possibly do is and again, I'm putting an example together here. Let's say I wrote a detection rule that looked for any time a productivity app like Word or Acrobat or Outlook or PowerPoint reached out to a network connection. That alone should probably raise the suspicion of some teams that are out there. But then I could take that event and push that over to alphaMountain and say, hey, I see it's reaching out. What types of things are they reaching out to and what's coming back? And then use categorical definitions from there. Because if I've got a Microsoft app reaching out to Microsoft.com, maybe for a software update or something like that, or OneDrive, I'm not necessarily suspicious of it. But if I've got that same productivity app reaching out to a site that alphaMountain's flagging as something malicious, or maybe categorically it just doesn't make sense, so I'm going to use a not operator in that case, then there's lots of ways I think that data can be very useful. And Chris, I'm going to bring my screen up one more time here for you. I've actually got, I think I went back and fixed in my browser what was that issue that was causing that detection rule, that window to time out on us there. But I'll hover right here over on this particular rule. And I'm just going to select this metadata, and hopefully everyone can see what I'm pulling up there. There we go. In any event, here we go. This is what I was looking for a little bit earlier. This is a DNS request fired up against the categorical API lookup from alphaMountain. And you can see in here, we've got the scope of a domain. It is category 34, which we know is the IT we were looking at earlier. And then there's that hard-coded threat Yeti URL that's inside of there if you wanted to follow that. I'll make a quick note for everyone here. That threat Yeti URL is something that we add to the data on the lookup. The nice thing about that is I can take that URL and flip that into my response, or flip it into like a ticketing system, or maybe an email alert or something like that. It lets me just expand upon that metadata a little bit further. But yeah, sorry, lots of scenarios I think that where this type of data adds a lot of value.
Yeah, and I could see if something suspicious was happening, you could then tag given endpoints to start using the API threat lookup from alphaMountain to see if there is anybody reaching out to known C2 servers and stuff like that.
I would say that would actually put alphaMountain as a first level detection, where I could say, if it's one of these 10 categories, tag it as suspicious, and we're going to look it up a little bit further. We're going to dig into it. So there's a lot of cases where alphaMountain might be my first indicator
Right.
that something bad has happened. And let's be clear, everyone, if you notice the different types of categories that they've got listed over here, these aren't always necessarily threat actor activity or some sort of nation state is in my systems or something like that. Maybe I am looking at a series of systems that are single use or they're very short lived or something like that. And I just want to know, is anyone downloading P2P files? Is anyone using peer-to-peer or torrent clients when they're using a single use system or virtual system or doing something else that may not be approved inside of the organization? So detection and response is not always, again, not always malicious activity. It might just mean I'm looking for something that I want to know is whether or not it's happening in my environment. This is an easy way to get there.
Yeah, and it's with most of the stuff that we do, it's like really cool because it's really limited, but it's not only limited by people's imaginations of how they want to apply the different technologies.
Absolutely.
Very cool. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us today. It was really cool to see how alphaMountain and LimaCharlie work together and the kind of detection capability we can build with those. If anybody has any feedback for future topics, they can send email to info@limacharlie.io. If we didn't manage to get to your question today in the chat, you can send it to that email as well. And we encourage everybody to join the conversation on the LimaCharlie community Slack channel at slack.limacharlie.io. So thanks very much.